What's up, guys? Today we're going to take a look at the VFX grip from VIRPIL. This grip is based on the same grip you can find in the pilot seat of the F-14 Tomcat. Now, VIRPIL did send me this grip in exchange for review, but the opinions you will see here in this video are my own. Let's go ahead and take a look. Now, at first glance, the stick looks like an identical F-14 Tomcat replica stick. But there are a few differences. It's not exactly one-to-one. For instance, the bottom portion near the nose wheel steering button, the housing is a little bit different. The angle right here where you would rest your ring and middle finger, the angle is a little bit different. And then the neck up here is a little bit thinner, but unless you're the kind of person that counts rivets on virtual airplanes, you likely will not care. Now, a nice feature for some of you is that the VFX grip is actually compatible with the Warthog base. The pins on the bottom are the same, and the mounting screw is exactly the same as the Warthog base. So this will work out pretty well. There are a couple slight differences in functionality when you use the Warthog base versus a VIRPIL base, and we'll go over those in a little bit in more detail. So let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of the grip. So we have the weapons release button, we have an 8-way and depress trim hat, we have the famed too close for missiles switching to guns weapon selector. This is a 4-position switch and then also depress, and the depress works in every position. We have a 2-stage trigger, the DLC wheel, the DLC engage, disengage, and chaff dispense button. We also have the nose wheel steering button, and we have the autopilot disengage paddle. Now, this grip can be purchased in 2 different configurations from VIRPIL, one of them with a twist axis and the other without. The unit with the twist axis has a set screw that you can screw in or out depending on how you want to use it. If you want to turn on the twist axis, you would unscrew it and then go ahead and screw it all the way back in, which is pretty far. I actually thought I was screwing it too far before. It goes in, I don't know, about ½ an inch, and that will actually turn it off, and the twist axis will not work at all. There's not even a little bit of play. So let's talk a little bit about the feeling of the buttons. The weapons release, DLC engage, disengage, and the nose wheel steering button, I am not a fan of at all. For one, there's a ton of wiggle. I don't know if you can see that in the camera there. Hopefully it focuses. But there's a ton of wiggle in this all the way around. Same with this one, same with this one. And on top of that, they're really mushy. So instead of starting to push and you would immediately feel feedback followed by a click that you push the button, there's a ton of play in it before anything happens. This one's not as bad as this one here. This one you can see I'm not even pushing or activating the button click yet. It's just got this mushy play to it. And then when you get to here, you push it and there's a little bit of tactile feedback. And then same with this one here. There's just a ton of play. I prefer a stiff button, but you know, maybe that's me, but the wiggle in it, you can move it around. I feel like that just could have been done a little bit better. The weapon selector is definitely one of the most unique pieces on this grip. Like I said before, it has 4 different positions, and in order to get it to the off position, you actually have to push down. You don't have to push all the way down to the point where you feel the button click, but just down, and then it goes into the off detent. And then if you want to come back out, you can't just push. You actually have to push down and then come back out. And all these ones, they just free flow between. And then when you're in, let's say, Sparrow Phoenix mode, you would push the button and that would toggle Sparrows and Phoenixes. If you're in Sidewinder, you can push the button and it'll actually toggle the station of the Sidewinder you're going to shoot. And then in gun, as far as I know, the button click does nothing. But it all works, and it works great in DCS. Now, the trim hat is one of my favorite trim hats I have had the pleasure of using so far. It's got a nice audible and tactile click. It's 8-way and it's not gated, which means you can free flow between all of the positions. Now, the interesting thing to me is in all the other grips I own, getting to the diagonals, okay, is always a pain. If you watch the Windows joystick configuration screen, when you go to push on a diagonal on an 8-way hat, you will see that you will hit, let's say you're trying to go top right, you would hit top or you would hit right before you hit top right, and that's just kind of the nature of it. It's a very narrow window. For this one, you can hit it every single time, and I don't really know the mechanics well enough on the internals to tell you why that is, but if for some reason you're buying this stick to play a space sim, this is great when you need those extra points of view or just buttons in general. For me, I'm not going to use the diagonals, but I would just like to note that it is a really nice point of view hat. Now the DLC wheel can be set up two different ways. You can set it so that at the extent of the forward or back pull or push, there's a button click. The other way is if you have a VIRPIL base. Now the button click would be for a Warthog base. If you have a VIRPIL base, you can actually set it up as an access and the button click. Not really useful for DCS. You usually would choose one or the other, but it's nice that they're both there and they both work that way. The last thing to note is the paddle. Now, this is probably one of my least favorite, I guess. I can see how VIRPIL wanted this to work. This works as an axis and an independent button click when you get to the end of the axis. So the idea, I'm assuming, is that they wanted this to work as a brake lever for anything that's not an F-14, or if you wanted to bind the brakes to the F-14 on this, you could. Again, this is one of those extra functionality pieces. You would need a VIRPIL base, and it doesn't work that way with Warthog base. Now, here's the problem. When I put my hand on it, and I go to pull this lever, if I'm using the Warthog base, or even this, and the idea is that I want to disengage, and I'm not using it as the setup for wheel brakes. When I pull this, I can't get to the extent I need to get the button click because my fingers are in the way. So what does that mean? I have to move more than one. Well, I can't do it with two, so I have to move all three, and I have to go all the way back. It feels unnecessary. It's too far. The other thing is it's not metal. So as you're pulling and waiting and waiting, when you finally get there, you can see there's a lot of play in it and a lot of bend. Not my favorite at all. I wish this was about half the size. I wish it was, about here. And I wish that it was metal, because I think if you were to shorten it and then you were to pull, you have a whole lot more room to pull even more and possibly break it. So at least with this length, it hits the controller here and then stops. If I could say I wanted something to be different here, it would be this was metal and shorter so that I didn't have to move all my fingers. You just pull here and, that would be the extent of it. The last thing is the two-stage trigger. The two-stage trigger is really nice. It has a good amount of force to pull it back to the first stage. The first stage you kind of pass through, you barely feel it. It's much more audible than it is a tactile. And then when you get through it, you don't have to move much further. That's probably hard to see for you, but it's probably a couple millimeters. And then you have a button click to have the second stage go off. And that's about it for buttons. It's it's made for the F-14, very specific. So let's talk a little bit about ergonomics. Now, I've been using this on and off for a couple of months now. And every time I go to use it, something feels off. And I'm not sure what it is. And I feel like I should have figured that out by now, but something just doesn't sit right with it. It's just not the most ergonomic feeling controller. Everything feels like I'm really reaching, my thumb is all the way over here. And then to reach for weapon release, I need to lift my finger out to the left, up and around, and push. And now I'm extending my thumb the direction that it doesn't really like to go. So then I'm taking my hand off of it. Everything's just in a weird spot. Now, I 100% don't think that's VIRPIL's fault. Obviously, this was made to be, you know, a replica of something that exists already. And, you know, maybe at the time of creating this, ergonomics wasn't such a big focus as it is now with the current HOTAS setup in the F-18 and the F-16 and all the other more modern jets. It feels fine and you get used to it over time, but right when you start using it, it's like, man, just it's not like holding the F-16 or the F-18 stick. Okay, let's talk about quality. The quality is pretty decent. It's using enhanced PU plastic, and it has a pretty good weight to it. You know, even off the base, it's heavy, but not too heavy. And when you put it on the base, that gives it a good amount of extra added feeling in the weight when you're using it. I've used some grips that are just completely too light for me, you know, and that's going to be a preference thing. It's personal taste. I like the metal grips because I like the weight of them. I know the metal isn't always the best solution, but for this one, it's a good medium. You know, it's not too heavy, not too light. A metal trigger would have been nice, and like I said earlier, paddle would have been a lot better as a metal paddle. At the end of the day, I'm kind of being picky there. It's not a total loss, and I wouldn't say it was something that should deter anybody from not buying it. Everything feels fairly solid aside from this, but what is that, a 1/4 of an inch extra? I wouldn't expect to break that just because it has that much play in it. There are a couple things, however, quality-wise, that I think could have been buttoned up a little bit better. The first one is this screw right here, and a little bit this screw as well. They're pretty sharp. There's no cap on them. They didn't need to be this length. They stick out just a little bit. But man, you rub your hand against them, especially this direction, and you know, my skin is literally catching on it right there. So that would have been nice. Just shorten up the screws or use, you know, a screw with a cap on it or something. I don't know. This seems like a weird oversight. They're just a little bit too long. I don't really notice it obviously once it's put together and in use, but it was something I caught my hand on when I first pulled it out of the package. It was like, wow, why is this piece sticking out right here? But if VIRPIL's taking notes, maybe future sticks, let's see if pieces are sticking out, and if they are, let's file them down a little bit. That's all. Now the second part is actually a problem, and more so for me or anybody who's going to decide to get this grip and swap it out with another grip over and over and over. If you don't have a dedicated base for it, this next bit's going to be a bit of a problem. So the really nice thing is that the connector comes out of the base and you can pull it pretty far out. And I think the idea here is that because it has the play, I can pull it out, plug it in, and then when I'm setting it on top, I can actually angle it left or right. You know, if you're going for you know, some extra carpal tunnel, you can go to the right, but most people would move it about 15 degrees, 16 degrees to the left, and especially if you're center sticking it, and that gives you a better ergonomic angle for your wrist. And that's nice, but here's the issue. This sucker, I can't get it to go back in anymore. And I haven't taken it apart yet. I'm probably going to try to fix it, or at least to see what the problem is. But what I suspect is that this is all metal, and on the inside, because of the twist axis, again, I haven't confirmed any of this yet, but because of the twist axis, when I push this in, wherever it's trying to coil to, it's getting stuck. And the problem is I can't go any further than this. And so when I put it on here, I really had to force it in, and you can see it kind of crimp the cable. It's like permanently twisted now because it kind of twisted itself back in like this. And there's actually a kink in the cable where it looks like it sat on the edge of this, and I crimped it a bit when I screwed it into the base. So this design just maybe because of the twist axis, there's some extra metal in there, and it's just kinking on it a bit, and it's not good. I can see that over time, I've taken this on and off that base about 15 times now, and it's already a problem. I feel like I'm gonna end up cutting this wire before too long just from the pressure of putting it on and off. So I will take it apart. Yeah, so I tried. It's glued. So there looks like there's glue here, 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 all the way around. I can't split it all the way open without damaging it too much. I'm not really in the mood to break it. Yeah, this could have been done a little bit better, VIRPIL. This really gave me a hard time, especially once it stopped working about halfway through all of my testing, and I would take it off and man, I'd really have to fight to get it back on. That drove me nuts. So let's talk a bit about this grip and who it's for. It's 100% not for everybody. I think VIRPIL knows this, and I think that if you come back to this video and check the comments after a couple days, you're gonna see about a dozen or so saying that this grip doesn't have enough buttons and it's a stupid waste of money. And if you're not trying to mimic or immerse yourself into that F-14 pilot kind of stuff, you're right. But if you are looking for the immersive experience and you fly the F-14 in DCS often, this grip might be what you're looking for. All right, guys, I hope you found this review helpful. And if you have any questions about the grip or for me in general, go ahead and leave them in the comments section below and I will get to it. Otherwise, you can join my Discord. That's also in the description below. I want to thank you guys for watching, and remember to like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time. Now, I keep looking up at this camera like you can see me.